All right, thank you very much, Nafi. So we'll take you just through some general updates about inspections in this slide. First note, as Nafi just mentioned, so we have a current exception to our inspection cancellation policy. So normally for us to conduct a final inspection for a solar system or energy storage system, the contractor does need to attend in order for the inspection to occur. But if you need to cancel or postpone the inspection for any reason, we'll allow you to do so up until the scheduled inspection time, at least while we're still in stage 5 of COVID restrictions. So that means if you need to cancel late, you can email solarinspections@austinenergy.com. We will go ahead and postpone the inspection for you. And normally, sorry, for some reason it keeps putting me on mute. I'm not sure why, but I'll keep putting myself back on mute. Anyway, normally the policy for cancellations is you need to cancel with us at least 24 hours in advance in order for the inspection not to be failed for late cancellation or no-shows. But while we're in stage 5, we'll put that policy on hold. And then also, if you do not show up to inspection and you did not notify us beforehand that you would not be showing up, that will still result in a failed inspection at this time. As far as our overall inspection pass rate, looking at last quarter, so the first quarter of last fiscal year, October to December, it was a 67% overall pass rate. So that's all final solar inspections. Ideally, we want to get this up at least to our 70% threshold for the rebate program, preferably, at least 80% in my opinion. This will reduce the amount of re-inspections that have to be requested and thereby help reduce the 4-week wait time that we have currently, seeing as we've hit some delays with our inspection backlog. And then we've listed out some top reasons for inspection failure at present. The meter cans, we'll address this in actually the next slide. I know there have been a lot of questions and a lot of confusion over the meter cans of late. We're hoping to help sort that out in the next slide, and hopefully the memos that we've sent out about that recently have also addressed that sufficiently as well. Unbroken neutrals, so remember that the neutral always needs to be broken in both the PV meter can and the AC disconnect. Just systems that are not QC'd, so systems that are not performing the way they should be at final inspection. Just small, any errors that can be caught through a normal QC after the system is installed. Just please make sure you're doing a thorough check of those before final inspection. Line side taps that are installed in a poor manner, our inspectors are catching those as well. And also make sure you have a safe working space around the electric service so that you're installing over level ground and not over a grade with no obstructions around the electrical equipment. Make sure to refer to the required clearances as listed in our design criteria and also our distribution interconnection guide. Just a reminder here on the right, if you're struggling to pass inspections, here's 3 keys to help you. Attend a technical training meeting, which you're doing right now. Use the checklist, the inspection checklist provided on page 63 of the interconnection guide. And also, you're always free to request a pre-construction or 100 meeting with our inspections group if you would like to get a design consult with any of our solar inspectors before you get started on the work. So please submit the solar inspection request form on the Austin Energy website if you want to request that pre-construction meeting, same as you would for requesting a final inspection. All right, next slide, please. All right, so addressing the meter socket issues. So again, we've had quite a few of these recently, mainly due to confusion over which meter cans are approved or not. So the first thing I wanted to point out here is that I know we've seen a number of Austin Energy or AE stamped meter cans out in the field, but unless the meter cans are listed on the meter socket specification page of our website, so unless they're listed on that web page, they are not pre-approved for use by Austin Energy in the field. So if your meter socket for that particular service type is not listed on the website, then you need to submit the metering equipment application form or MEA form to our distribution metering group and get their approval before you install that meter can. So even AE stamp meter cans that may not align with the ones that are listed on our website, Those AE stamp cans are not approved for use until and unless you get an approved MEA form from distribution metering. I see in the chat there, just email distribution metering, so AE distribution metering at austinenergy.com, and they will send you a copy of the MEA form to fill out, and then you can submit that back to them and they'll issue an approval or rejection. So currently the MEA form they instituted because of supply shortages of the Millbank meter cans that are on our approved list. And I believe those supply shortages are still continuing, although as far as I know, there are some vendors around town that have a limited supply of them right now. So I believe they're limiting how many any particular buyer can get at one time. So my understanding is that distribution metering is still issuing MEA approvals, at least on a limited basis for the time being. They are grandfathering in meter cans that were purchased prior to October 1st, 2021. So if you can show proof, documentation of purchasing it prior to that date, then they should be able to grant you an MEA approval for those. Although please note that there are two types of meter cans that we do not allow under any circumstances in our service territory. So any ring type meter sockets and any horn bypass meter sockets. I don't know how often we would even see those, but to just keep in mind that those two types are not allowed. So if you're installing a PV meter socket or you are doing a service upgrade for your project and you need to replace the billing meter can, make sure that you're getting the MEA approvals for each of those. So for instance, if you have a service upgrade as part of your solar installation and you're replacing both meter sockets, you'll need to get a separate MEA for each of those meter sockets. One won't cover both of them. And just a reminder too, that if you've gotten an MEA approval for a single type of meter can for previous projects, that does not mean it is approved for future projects. So every single project where you're using a can that's not on our pre-approved list, each of those projects requires a separate MEA approval from our distribution metering team. So just keep all these things in mind. I believe most of those are in the memo that we sent out recently as well. But of course, feel free to reach out to me at solarinspections@austinenergy.com if you've got any questions about any of this. We're trying to work with everyone as best we can to make sure that that y'all can get approved meter cans out there and get your customers' systems turned on as quickly as possible. All right, next slide, please. All right, so a little bit of intro to energy storage systems guidance. This continues to change as we see more ESS out in the field, and as we continue to fully embrace the code surrounding ESS installations, and we're continuing to sync up with the Austin Fire Department as well about their concerns about safety. So remember that we are in the process of updating the distribution interconnection guide again, and that those updates will include more information and guidance on energy storage installations in the next iteration. So our expected timeline for that is the second quarter of this calendar year. So that is in progress. We have some updates in progress for both solar and energy storage permitting. So the plan is at this time to have both solar and energy storage projects to all be permitted under a single permit type, so that auxiliary power electrical permit type that y'all are familiar with. So all solar is currently permitted for Austin Energy customers under the auxiliary power work type. We're working to get all energy storage systems permitted under that work type as well, regardless of whether it's energy storage paired with solar or whether it is standalone energy storage for that project. So there will also be some updates regarding a revised permit description for line-side tap projects. So if you are using a line-side tap to complete your installation, the permitting department has asked us to specify in the permit description language that your project is using a line-side tap. So you can see here, this is example language of how we would like to see you fill out the permit descriptions for that specific project type. The permitting department wants to be alerted to all line-side tap projects. As for what to do with solar and storage installations, if you're waiting on the battery installations, so I think a lot of this arose in part out of the long wait time for shutdowns this past year, which continue as far as I'm aware, and partly out of, I think, some battery supply shortages last year as well. So if you have the solar system installed, but you are waiting on the energy storage system installation, or you're waiting on that shutdown and it's not going to be done particularly soon, you can request a solar only inspection first from us. So what you would do is you would submit the solar inspection request form on our website. You would note that there are batteries involved in the project, and it will ask you whether the battery system and or the transfer switch are installed. If you say that they are not installed, it will ask you whether you want a solar only inspection at this time. And so if you say yes to that, we will send an inspector out to look at the solar portion. And if they pass that, they will pass it as a partial pass in the permit system. So that will leave your auxiliary power permit open, so that we can come back later and review the battery portion of the installation after that is complete. And then once we pass that battery portion of the installation, then we will fully close the permit. But once the solar only portion of the inspections is done up front, then the customer can get their meter, their PV meter right then and there, so that they can go ahead and get their system turned on. They can start generating before the battery gets installed. So this is just a way for the customers to get the solar piece wrapped up before the battery installation is complete. So those are some quick updates there. Stuart, I think, will have some more information on ESS for you later in the presentation. Next slide, please.
Excuse me, David. I guess Rory has raised his hand.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Rory.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We got you.
Okay, hey, listen, that last sentence there, I think a permit is still good for 180 days. Just to make a note for everybody, we don't police that permit. For some reason it takes longer than that 180 days. That it's up to the contractor to renew that, not us to remind them. That's happened to us. I don't know why that permit ain't good anymore, and why didn't we let them know? And that's not up to us. So just a note that keep up with that permit. Make sure it's still up to date, not out of date. Because sometimes these batteries, if they take longer than 6 months, they got to keep up with the permit. That's all I'm trying to say. That make any sense?
That's a real good point, Rory. Yeah, so just a general reminder to you to please make sure your permits are active at the time you request inspections with us. So we cannot schedule final inspections with an expired permit. And as Rory says, those permits are good for 180 days. And then if the project's still not done, you got to go ahead and renew that permit. It's, I think, $20 to renew. Awesome. Thanks, Rory. All right, next slide, please, Navi. Anybody have any questions about those slides we just covered? And if you put them in chat, I'm happy to answer them there too. All right, we'll move on to the next part. So most of y'all who are not new to us know what these references are, but for those of you who are new to Austin Energy, these are the documents to live by as far as what guidance to follow when you're installing solar. So of course we start with the National Electric Code. We go by the NEC 2020, specifically Articles Section 690 and 705. Austin Energy's design criteria, that covers generally how to install when you're requesting new service, new electric service on the Austin Energy system. And out of that comes the Distribution Interconnection Guide, which is sort of a child document to the design criteria. So the interconnection guide specifically refers to how to install distributed generation resources on our grid, primarily solar, but also energy storage. So the interconnection guide is going to be particularly important. So make sure you're referencing this regularly as you are going through design and installation of your systems. The inspection checklist is located on page 63 of the Distribution Interconnection Guide. That will give you a reference point to the document that our inspectors take with them and use at every final inspection, and show you generally the equipment and processes that they go through when reviewing. The electrical city ordinances. So Austin does have some local ordinance related to electrical installations and permitting that go beyond what's listed in the NEC. So that is in local ordinance. And program guidelines, that refers to our rebate program guidelines. So for those of you who are in or will be joining our rebate program shortly, make sure you're reviewing those guidelines as well.
Okay.
And anybody who's not on mute, just please make sure to mute yourself as well, or I will mute you for you. All right, next slide, please. All right, and this just shows you where on our website you'll access various documents. So if you go to the Austin Energy homepage, then access the contractors section, and then access the electric service design and planning page, the design criteria manual, the distribution interconnection guide, the DGPA, which we'll talk about later. They'll all have links here. You can also go through this section to find our meter sockets specifications page for the approved meter sockets. All right, next slide, please. Is anyone else having any audio issues? I see Chris's comment in chat there. And Derek, I see your question as well. I don't have a good answer for that right now, although if anybody else on our team has an answer for that, please let Derek know. But yeah, at this time, it's kind of we're dealing with the situation as it is. And again, I apologize that it's taking so long for shutdowns in certain parts of the city. All right, next slide. And I think I'll be turning it over to Stuart here. Let me just double check. Let's see. Yes, Stuart, I think this starts your section.
Thanks, David. Hey guys, Stuart here, one of 3 inspectors. So a day in the life of the solar project here. So one of these steps is really to lay out exactly how a project flows and sort of avoid some of the pitfalls that we see. So a good design, as we know, takes more than one person. So it's a collaborative process to get that design right. And like David said, we are on the newest code cycle. So the 2020 NEC is what you'll use. And it's recommended too, it's not required, but if you have a NABCEP designer on site, you can definitely avoid some of the problems that we would find later on in the project. So a design does take collaboration between a designer, an electrician, and a site assessor, because there may be things on that service that aren't related to solar, but will need to be addressed. And of course, doing that work and that research on the front end ultimately will keep the customer happy and save you guys any sort of unexpected costs later on in the project. Part of that design too, there's a optional pre-construction meeting we recommend
Hit mute.
on site that's existing that may cause an issue at inspection. You can request that an on-site pre-construction meeting, but often sometimes those can be handled, via digital messaging, text, emails, things like that, just so that you have any questions answered before you start digging into the project and installing things. So shutdowns, those are the 2 numbers there that you would call if you do have to have a shutdown for a service upgrade or some work on the service that's related to the tying in of the solar. The meter variances, so if you have you've got a solar meter that's not within 10 feet of a billing meter, or there's some obstruction, like say the fence, and you need to put it in the backyard for some reason, that will go through our guy Abdur, who's usually pretty quick on the turnaround. So that's in a week or 2, you'll have a meter variance approval. I mean, those are generally approved. I haven't seen a situation where they weren't approved in reasonable situations. Like David was mentioning too, it's a 6-month wait for service shutdowns at the moment, which I know is kind of a wrench in the gears. I will say that in my experience, if you've got a shutdown scheduled for 6 months out, you can call actually frequently. They have cancellations. So I would say just stay on top of those phone numbers, and you can generally, if you're lucky, you can move up shutdowns from the originally scheduled date. The permitting office, so you'll need to get your permit active and paid for before we can actually go out and perform inspections. So just make sure before you request inspection that your permit is active and that it's paid for, so that we'll have somewhere to put that information. I've been on site before and there hasn't been an active permit, and there's just nowhere to place that inspection result. Make sure that's active or you request inspection. For the installation, again, you'll pay attention to our guidelines. The interconnection guide, section C is of particular importance. I think that spells out exactly the components that you're going to need to have in these systems, as well as some diagrams that will sort of help you if you have any questions about in what order or in what place certain components are, like a meter can and the disconnect to be placed appropriately. How long that takes, obviously that's up to you and your team and the homeowner. And just remember that if your name is on the permit, that work belongs to you. So there's no excuse for subcontractor doing work that maybe you didn't directly oversee. It's still your work, and ultimately it's our job as inspectors to make sure it's safe. So it doesn't matter who did it. It's your name. It'll be considered your work. As far as inspection goes, checklist is something that you can print out and maybe keep with you, because that's what we will be using to make sure that everything is safe and installed according to code and according to our local ordinances. The wait time right now is about 4 weeks, which is longer than we'd like it to be. So I would just, again, reiterate that doing a quality control check on all your jobs before we are sent out there is a great way to keep that inspection time down, keep your failure rate down as well. Meter installations, 5 to 10 days. I think our design criteria says allow 5 business days. So I think that's probably an appropriate thing to tell homeowners if they're curious after an inspection. There'll be an inspection, there'll be a 5-day wait, then they'll have their meter. I think we're good on this one. Let's see, contractor representative must be present at inspections. Yes, please have somebody who is qualified to be there, ideally is familiar with the system, and can perform the work that needs to be performed if there are some small deficiencies that we find on site. Another great way to keep your inspection pass rate up is to have somebody on site who can make quick corrections, because we want to work with you on this. We don't like failing inspections. It's a win-win if we can get inspections passed, the customer's happy, our wait times stay under 2 weeks, which is kind of what we're shooting for. All right, next slide, Nafi. So here's some key differences between what you'll find in the national code and what we require here locally. So unlike lots of utilities that allow solar, you will have a meter in Austin Energy. So if you don't have a meter socket installed, then you don't have solar. So make sure that you pay attention to the design criteria as far as how to wire up that meter can, and also, like I said, section C, the interconnection guide, also spells out exactly how to tie in that meter can with your rated AC disconnect for the system. Our color codes are the opposite of what you're used to seeing. So we're red, black, phase 1, red, phase 2 is black. Also spelled out in the design criteria. You'll also need a full-size neutral through the inverter or the aggregate panel. You've got something like microinverters or hydros on the roof. Just everything on the ground, on the wall, you'll need a neutral that is the same size as your ungrounded conductors. Another thing that's above and beyond the NEC is that we require a number 6 copper equipment grounding conductor, and that's from the point of interconnection to the array. So make sure that, and that number 6 obviously is bigger than what the NEC would require, so pay close attention to that. Something else that we don't allow currently is to have any energy storage or customer loads on the solar side of our solar meter. So quickest way to sort of verify that is that everything that comes off of the roof goes through a meter first. It goes through our solar meter first, then you can distribute your loads or distribute that circuit however it needs to be. But you can't basically have loads or a reverse load on the solar meter. So it can spend one way. So that's what that is about. Line side taps. Any panels that have line side taps, they've got to have a main breaker. So what you're doing with a line side tap is basically creating a separate service disconnecting means. And so you've got to have overcurrent protection as close as practical to where you've made that tap. And there's a few diagrams in Appendix B of the interconnection guide too that helps you understand that. Like we said, our meter can, this is the one and only one. So the U4801 XL5T9. That's the meter can that you've got to use. Pay close attention because it's you can be forgiven for being confused that there might be a meter can that has a 200 amp bypass handle and it's got an AE stamp on it and it's still not approved. So pay very close attention to the label inside of that can. It's got to match that. Please leave 2-inch clearance around all sides of the meter can, and that's for serviceability around the can in the future. So there's equipment walls get tight sometimes, but keep that tape measure on you. 2 inches on all sides of either meter can, billing or solar. Address numbers. I see a lot of like gold on black address numbers, which are, I think they're cheaper, but they're also harder to read. So they got to be black on white. And make sure those can be on either meter can or the main panel, somewhere where it's obvious for the metering department to see the address if they're approaching an equipment wall. Rebate program requirements. So what we are looking for, if you're applying for the rebate, you've got to show us that your array in total, all subarrays combined, need to have a 75% ESRF. So that's the TSRF, which maybe you're familiar with. Hopefully a lot of you are, is essentially a distillation of all the considerations that go into how much that system is going to produce. So in an ideal situation, based on where we are in the world, right, you want to face south at about a 30-degree tilt. So as you stray from that, it's going to be harder and harder to get to that 75% ESRF. So just bear in mind that if the given azimuth and tilt of a roof is not ideal, then you'll need to have more sun exposure further you get from the ideal orientation. And this is kind of the most gameable component of this whole system, I believe. It's easy to get sort of lost in the details of exactly how much your system is going to produce, but there are tools and you will need to bring them on site to help you with that. Something like a Pathfinder or Solometric tool would be a good resource. And if it's a rebated project, also keep in mind that a lightning arrestor should be installed, and that can be installed. Our diagrams in the interconnection guide have it in the EV AC disconnect, but it can be in really in any distribution equipment at the equipment wall. Alrighty. So good design is a collaboration between sales and design. And I would say not just sales and design, but sales and design, and a site assessor and an electrician. So there's lots of things that go into a successful project. One of those primarily is that someone has been on site and has given the existing service a thorough inspection to make sure that there's nothing unexpected at the end of the project that might require you to upgrade something that you weren't aware of, which of course can slow the project down and increase project costs. So again, there's a pre-construction meeting, which is optional, but we would suggest if you have any questions and there's an iffy service that may need upgrading, to get in touch with us before we go out and do the final inspection. Make sure to look at the equipment wall during the design process. So like I said, it's a good idea to have both a NABCEP designer and an electrician, an experienced solar electrician, to assess what that service is and if anything needs to be upgraded in order to connect safely, because we will be looking closely. Any service that has been integrated with solar will need to be upgraded if there are any deficiencies. Commercial projects, they should always request a pre-construction meeting. So this is really the only way that you're going to get an electrical plan review before final inspection, is doing this pre-construction meeting. So you'll get in a commercial setting, you will get plans reviewed, and they will be reviewed for building code, but they will not be looking closely at the electrical plans. So this is the way right here to nip any problems in the bud on the front end. Some common errors that we see, I was mentioning, service upgrade requirements not met, shading, paying attention to the roof is another thing. It's easily overlooked, but if that roof is aged, and essentially what you're doing if you install solar without alerting the customer is just creating more cost down the line. There'll be could potentially be thousands of dollars to remove and reset that array if you put solar panels on an old roof. Meter access and spacing. See that in the next section, but basically you need 3 feet in front of the meter, and it's gotta be within certain height restrictions, 6 feet basically. Essentially, you should be able to look at the center of the meter can, and it shouldn't be taller than you. All right, next slide. So what does a good line diagram look like? This is a pretty good one here. You'll see you call out all the components within the system. You've got the module count. You've got wire sizing. You've got conduit. You've got your enclosures and their ratings. You've got details as far as overcurrent protection in all enclosures. And you've notated how you're interconnecting to the service. So in this case, you can see there's a 30 amp backfeed breaker at the bottom of the bus bar. And they've also noted that there's an existing grounding electrode system, which is not a given. So as far as designing the system from the beginning, this is something you should pay close attention to, because a designer will, by default, have that in their existing grounding electrode system, but you do indeed need to verify it during the site assessment. Alrighty, next slide. So here's a good example of an equipment wall that's installed according to national code and our local ordinances. Notice that meters disconnects, they're all grouped within 10 feet of each other. There's no need to go to another location on site to do any sort of service work on the system. It's all right there in one spot. So that's ideal. If you, for some reason, do need to install that meter can at a different spot on the premises, that's when the meter variance approval comes into place, which should be handled during the design process too, because you want to have that variance approved before you install the meter can. Everything should be labeled as per NEC 690 and 705. But pay close attention to those two articles. There are also above and beyond 705, there's some guidelines in the interconnection guide with some specific nomenclature as far as labeling goes, especially when it comes to energy storage and batteries on site. So reference the interconnection guide if you have any questions on labeling. And once again, 2 inches of clearance around the solar meter. Probably in this situation right here, you can see the billing meter may not quite have 2 inches. That wouldn't be a failure, but you know, going forward, doing things right, let's keep 2 inches around that meter can for future serviceability. All right, next slide. So line side taps. This is a diagram here in the interconnection guide. Just note that when you do a line side tap, we do allow piercing taps within main panels on a case-by-case basis. So just because we allow line side taps in panels, please don't assume that it's a sure thing without looking behind that dead front and making sure that you have adequate space in there to make a safe tap. Because, like I said, it's definitely not a given. So when you do that tap, ideally your solar disconnect is within 10 feet or as close as practical on the outside of the building to the main service. That disconnect needs to be a minimum of 60 amps. So even if you've only got a 30 amp circuit, that you're tapping, you still need a 60 amp disconnect enclosure. Whether or not you have to use something like fuse reducers, that's acceptable, but the enclosure itself needs to be rated for 60 amps, even on a circuit that doesn't require 60 amps. Alrighty, next slide. So here are two examples, bad and the good. Notice on the left, you can kind of see where those taps are. Panel is chock full. Wouldn't necessarily be a problem to have a backfeed breaker in that panel, even though it's full, but you can see that those taps are placed on the side of the panel. So that's violating the NEC because you have a 75% fill rule there. And with those taps, you're potentially putting mechanical stress on the main breaker and on other circuits in that panel. Kind of one good rule of thumb is that if you can put that dead front in there and close it without having to actually put any stress on the dead front, you'll probably be good. But again, in the left situation, that would be more than likely that would be a service upgrade. And the one on the right, you can see that's how to do it right there. You want your taps to be in a clear spot at the top or the bottom of the panel, with plenty of working room around them, and they need to tap the service conductors in a straight length of service conductor, so not at the bend of the service conductor. So again, these are case by case evaluated. So if you've got any questions, pre-construction meeting would be a good place to have those questions answered. All right. So a shade analysis requirements. If we request a shade analysis, you've got 10 days to give it to us from the time of inspection. What we're looking for is that someone has been on site in person and used some sort of shade tool to actually evaluate that on the roof where the modules can go. Things like Aurora and remote software that can sort of do a vague assessment won't be acceptable if we get on site and we determine that there's some heavy shading. So, and I would recommend too that, sometimes the designer or somebody who isn't on site, they just won't have perfect information, and you need to use your best judgment and common sense as far as where these modules are going, because it's entirely possible that the system will have been designed in a certain way, and if no one takes it upon themselves to take a look at this array and be like, this is under a tree, then, if someone needs to take responsibility at some point in the process. So if you're an installer and a design calls for an array under a tree or some other shading obstruction, it would be best to contact your designer and see if that can be reevaluated for you before you start putting holes in customers' roofs. The things to avoid or to avoid a warning is to provide that shade report within 10 days. And again, the total solar resource fraction would be at least 75%, and that's for the entire array. So each subarray needs to be considered as a whole, and you still need to achieve that 75%. And like I was saying earlier, on a 30-degree tilt facing south is ideal. The further you get from that, east or west, the more likely it is that you will have shading issues that don't get you to that 75%. All right, next slide. A note on shade surveys. Well, like I was saying, it's there are a lot of pitfalls in doing in actually getting to a good shade analysis. There are software tools that will help you aggregate some of that data that you've taken on site, but it is important that you are on site with a shade tool, locating yourself where the actual array is going to go. You just need to pay attention that you're setting the proper tilt and azimuth for each array. You need to input the correct data, which oftentimes does entail more than just using a remote software application. So you'll want to take multiple pictures of each array generally in the corners of each array, in the most shaded parts of the array. Generally at the lower down on the roof is where shading is most prominent. So be aware of that. A report submitted without a site map indicating where each photo was taken will be rejected. So there's a lot of attention to detail that goes into these reports. So please make your best effort to give us the information that we need. And just so you know too, I do have a ladder and a pathfinder. So potentially I will be on site, and I've been site assessor in solar for many years. So I am familiar with what it takes to create a good shade report. So your best. All right, next. Do we have questions?
Hello there, I have a question. This is Chris Umstead with Icon Power.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I don't know if I just missed it, but as far as the shade report is concerned, that needs to be on every project or only when you ask?
I would recommend that you guys do a shade report just for your own records and for customer satisfaction. If you're at all concerned that there may be shading issues.
Okay.
When it's clearly not required, then you wouldn't need to do a shade report. If you're on a 2-story building out in the middle of nowhere, you wouldn't
Okay,
report.
that makes complete sense. The only reason I ask is because, well, I guess that's irrelevant. Okay, thank you.
I just want to chime in and say that as far as our rebate program is concerned, you don't need to provide a shade report with a rebate application. It's only if we specifically request it during the application review process that you need to provide it for those purposes.
Okay, that makes sense. I appreciate the clarification.
All right, and there was a question in the chat about lightning arresters. It says, Stuart, was there a policy change for lightning arresters, or are lightning arresters required on rebated projects only? And if there was a policy change, can you provide that policy number?
Yeah, lightning arresters are required only via the rebate program. So if it's not a rebated job, we wouldn't require you to have a lightning arrestor. It's a good idea. You should install one. But yes, if it's a rebated project, then we will actually make you install a lightning arrestor. Does that answer that question? Hopefully. Also a good idea is surge protective devices. So if you're doing something like a backfeed breaker, we wouldn't make you upgrade that service to entail a surge protective device, but it's never a bad idea because the new code, if you are doing new services, do require surge protective devices in main panels. Also a good idea. All right, next slide. Meter variances, we discussed that a little bit. You should get them prior to installation because it's not a sure thing that the meter variance will be approved. In all likelihood, it will, but you need our approval before that happens. And Abdur is your man. That's his email address right there. What you'll need to submit to him is a 1-line drawing of your electrical plans and anything that might support your argument for the need for a variance, including on-site pictures. That might be the fastest way to get a response from Abdur. There is a actual meter variance form. I'm not sure if we have a link here somewhere, but you'll just fill that out, which has basic project details. And then he will respond with that same document with his stamp of approval on it. And you'll either bring that to inspection or it can be uploaded in the solar inspection request process so that the inspectors will have access to that digital documentation before an inspection. That's what I would suggest. But again, on-site hard copies of these documents is also acceptable. And that can take it for 2 weeks too. So start that early because you don't want to have that slow the project down. Temporary shutdowns, when to request them. Any install that requires an AE service shutdown, you'll have to get a separate permit for the shutdown. Those are the numbers to call in order to schedule that shutdown. The pro tip, if you're just upgrading the service for a shutdown, it's possible the line side tap might save you some time and effort. But again, it's a case by case basis. So you need to look closely at that service and see if it's appropriate to do a line side tap in that situation. If the energy storage system is the reason for the shutdown, you'll pull one permit, both the solar and the energy storage. And if you don't have the batteries and you'd like to commission the solar system and you're waiting on the batteries, it is acceptable for you to request inspection, and then we can, assuming the solar passes, we'll give you a partial pass, and will be a second inspection on that same permit to inspect the batteries. All right, next slide. But here's a good side-by-side of when and you would need a variance and when you would not need a variance. Notice that those 2 meters on the left there, they're within 10 feet of each other, but you've got an obstruction between the two. So they're not technically inside of each other. You've got a fence. So if you've got building meter that you need to put behind a fence like that, that would be when you would contact Abdur at Austin Energy and get that approval before installing that meter. The picture on the right there, they've just separated the solar equipment from the main service to avoid the gas regulator there. That's within sight. It's as close as practical, and it's all on the same wall with no obstruction. So you wouldn't need a meter variance in that case. Next slide. Any more questions? All righty. I think I'll pass it off to David now.
All right, I'll go ahead and jump in. Before I start talking about the permits, I just wanted to address Ivan's, I'll address some questions in the chat later. So as far as permits are concerned, these are the permit types that you would need to be concerned about for a solar installation project. So starting with the auxiliary power work type of permit, that auxiliary power work type is what is required for every solar installation and soon for every energy storage installation in Austin Energy territory. So you'll apply for that permit through the Austin Build and Connect portal. So that's the city permitting portal. And if your company is a registered contractor with the city of Austin, you will have you should have a company account in Austin Build and Connect. If you have a commercial project, this usually goes through the commercial plan review division. So instead of applying through Austin Build and Connect, which handles trade only or standalone permit applications, you would go through commercial plan review because those commercial projects need a package of permits, including a building permit and electrical permit, rather than just one. And remember that Austin Energy does not handle permitting installation. Doesn't handle permitting issuance. Sorry, I just stumbled over that. But so for any questions regarding your permit applications and permit status, please call the permitting department at that number. And do not contact Austin Energy because we will not be able to help you with moving the permit along. Building permits, these are required for all commercial. So that's part of why you go through commercial plan review. They're also required for various types of residential projects. So the good way to remember it is if your project just involves panels that are mounted flush to the roof, then you do not need a building permit. You can just go through Austin Build and Connect and apply for the auxiliary power electrical permit. But for anything involving panels that are not mounted flush to the roof, so for instance, if you've tilted them up, if you are installing ground mount, really if you're creating any new structure that you're going to place the panels on, and also if you're using solar shingles, so solar tiles, like the Tesla solar roof, then those need to get a building permit as well. So for that, it's going to end up going through the residential plan review process in the Development Services Department. And so that will result in both a building permit and electrical permits. Also, these two types of permits on the bottom, these may be involved in your projects. So if you have to do any work on the electric service, which we define as either working on the billing meter or working on the utility side, so upstream of the billing meter, For instance, if you're working on the riser, feeder wires. So those are going to involve an upgrade work type of electrical permit. So that work has to be permitted separately. It has to be separately inspected by city electrical inspections before your solar inspection occurs. But make sure to fill out and submit an electric service planning application. This is an Austin Energy form, and you'll need that anytime you are working on new or modified electric services. And the electrical permit with a repair work type, that is if you're doing work on the customer side of the billing meter only, and you're not touching the billing meter or the utility side thereof. So for instance, if you're doing a service panel rebuild, that would be something that would be falling under a repair permit. And same as above, you'd apply for that repair permit through the Austin Building Connect portal, unless there's a larger scope of work going on that would require you to go through plan review. All right, next slide, please. All right, and just remember, do not install until you have a permit. You cannot be doing any electrical work on these projects without the proper permit in hand. For rebated projects, we do require that if you are using a subcontractor, that you, the contractor that has sold the project, should be the contractor listed on the auxiliary power permits. So subcontractors are not allowed to pull auxiliary power permits under our rebate program rules. If your project is not rebated, then that rule does not apply. So again, any work on the electric service, so upgrades or any repairs to the customer side of the service or to the customer side of the meter, those require a separate electric permit. The subcontractor can pull those even for rebated projects. Those permits, upgrade or repair, do need to be closed out before the final solar inspection so that we have the city electrical team's confirmation that everything is good to go. And also just to note that if you failed an inspection and there is a reinspection fee incurred on the permit, please make sure you pay that reinspection fee before you request reinspection with us. Otherwise, that creates a holdup in our ability to install the customer's meter after the inspection passes. Just some common errors listed here on the right. I won't go through all of them, but again, just make sure that all those things I mentioned, that you've checked those boxes. And we have some best practices here as well. So generally, you want to have one permit per interconnection. So for instance, if there is, let's say there's a duplex and you're installing solar on each of those meters, you're going to need permits for each of those meters, each of those residences. And make sure you close out those processes separately. All right, next slide, please. So I think this was a question earlier from Stephanie, but to cover it here, so all solar projects in Austin Energy territory require an auxiliary power permit from the city of Austin. So even if your project is outside city limits, it still requires a city of Austin electrical permit. Regardless of whether you have to pull a permit from another jurisdiction, like the city of Pflugerville or from Travis County. So the city of Austin permit is required in addition to those permits. And we will not perform inspection or set the PV meter without that city of Austin auxiliary power permit. Our inspectors need to see an active permit and need to be able to close that permit once the inspection passes. And we just have some permit description sample language for you here. You're not required to follow this, but we very much recommend that you include this type of language in your permit description so as to better specify your project to the permitting department. And if your project includes energy storage, just make sure you're including language about the energy storage system in your permit description as well. And again, also remember to reference the line side tap if you are using a line side tap for your project. So that should go into the permit description as well. So we prefer not to see permit descriptions that just say installation of solar panels. We prefer some more specificity as to the exact type of project based on these parameters here. All right, next slide, please. Okay, the distributed generation planning application, or DGPA. So this is an Austin Energy form that is required for every auxiliary power permit application that you submit. So if your project is a smaller project, so less than 50 kW AC, then that does not require Austin Energy review first. You can just fill it out, submit it with your permit application. Anything that is 50 kW or above requires Austin Energy review and approval first before you submit the permit application. So if it is between 50 and 500 kW, you'll submit it to our team at the DGPA review address. We will review it, make sure that everything is good to go. Primarily, we're checking the transformer sizing for the transformer that serves that site to make sure that our infrastructure is sufficient to handle the new distributed generation resource. If it is more than 500 kW or if it's new construction, this will require review by our DER integration team. So please submit to the email in that box there, AE System Engineering Team. That will usually require some additional legwork on their end. There's an interconnection agreement in our distribution interconnection guide that is generally required to be filled out for those 500 kW and above projects as well. And so anything usually 1 megawatt or over, if you're going to be engaging in any massive project like that, is going to require an interconnection study from our DER integration and engineering teams as well before you can go through permitting. And so anything that's on the downtown network, and this will be rare, but the downtown network, if you go to page 51 of our interconnection guide, there is a map of where the downtown network extends. But we had very strict requirements about what resources can be placed down there, including a rule that there can't be any backfeeding into the grid down there. That requires a review by the DER integration team. No matter what the system size is, if it's going on the downtown network, it needs this review. And just remember, for the DGPA, it's not just for solar, it's also for energy storage. So if you are installing both solar and energy storage, that system size threshold is going to be based on the combined size of your solar and storage systems. So the AC rating of your solar system plus the peak power kW rating of your energy storage system that you're installing. So if those combined are 50 and above, then that does require Austin Energy review. And just to note, if your project is only to install an energy storage system and there is no solar, there is a box there where you're supposed to report the solar array STC rating. And so for those ESS only projects, you would just enter 0 for that STC rating, and then enter the battery sizing information on some fields below in the form. If you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out to DGPA Review or reach out to Solar Inspections. We are happy to give you more information about that. All right, next slide, please. All right. Let's see. Just looking at the chat here. I will let us get on to the next section. I'm going to answer these questions in the chat here in a minute. And just a quick, I think, Stuart, I believe you're going to take back over here.
Yeah, thanks, David. So CT meter cans, these are different than the self-contained meter cans that we generally install in residential applications. If the service is large, generally in commercial situations, you will have a CT meter, which means that there will be a parallel inspection process, which will not involve one of the 3 of our solar inspectors. So you will need to have an inspection solely for that meter can. You'll need to have that meter set in place and the system commissionable before we can go out and do a true inspection on any of those projects that have that CT meter can. So just keep in mind that not the regular self-contained meter can that you're used to getting with the bypass handle at the supply house, then you're probably going to have a separate inspection process. The rule of thumb for that is anything that's single phase over 350 amps or 3-phase that's 225, more than likely you're going to have a CT meter. And that's the contact information down there below the metering operations. You'll get in contact with them to request that inspection. All right, next. So the meters must be, this is the one and only. Again, it's the U4801 XL 5T9. It's a Millbank. 5T9, that T stands for terminal. So there's a way that you can see it. You got a meter can closed up and it's sealed, and we might have put a transparent blank in there. You can tell there's actually a 5th terminal on the center left of that socket. So if for some reason you can't get into the can, that's the clearest way visually to see that you've got that proper meter can. Needs to be accessible 24 hours a day. Of course, if it's behind a fence and we're doing an inspection, just make sure that the homeowners are aware that inspection is happening and that we can get access to that in order to do a complete inspection. The meters should be grouped within 10 feet of each other. If not, again, you'll need to talk to Abdur and get that meter variance so that you can have an approval to place a meter can on a different wall or behind an obstruction away from the existing billing meter. You'll need 3 feet of clearance in front of the meter. So if there's any bushes or other trip hazards within 3 feet of that wall where the meter can is, those will need to be either removed or somehow handled so that there's no more trip hazard. And once again, 2 inches of clearance around all meters. Something to pay close attention to is cut seals. So if you're the site assessor or the electrician that's on site evaluating before the job gets started, just pay close attention to the billing meter. Sometimes you'll find that the seal has been cut and you have no idea what happened, but at the time the inspection happens, it will be on you if it hasn't been addressed prior to that. So before conducting any work, make sure that the meter on site has a seal, and that is the email address there if you find that an actual meter seal was cut. So what you'll need to do is stop work, alert the attention of the AE Revenue Protection, and let them handle it before you move forward so that you're not on the hook for someone else's potentially dangerous work. Some common errors in metering is the meter is upside down or it's wired incorrectly. The solar output circuit is always going to be on the line side of that meter, so that meter spins in the proper direction. Pay close attention to that. The meter is not between 30, that should say 30 inches to 72 inches. So, and that's to the center of the meter where you can actually read the numbers, 30 inches on the low side, so 2.5 feet, and then 6 feet on the high side. Keep it within that range. Like we talked about, improper meter cans, the one and only, the U4801 XL5T9. That's the one you got to go with currently. And that's mentioned on the AE meter socket website too. So please keep that website bookmarked too, so because that may be updated. You'll need to be aware of that. Meters behind the locked gate and inspection. Like I was saying, just make sure the homeowner's aware that inspection is happening when it's happening, and that we'll have access to everything that we need to have access to conduct a thorough inspection. Temporary meter left inside or permanent meter of permanent meter. Yeah, so if we find that there's a meter installed temporarily before the inspection process, we won't be happy about that. You're really not supposed to commission the system at all. You can have a meter in there if you're if you happen to have a meter can that doesn't have a bypass handle. You can use your temporary meter in order to commission the system, make sure it's working properly as part of your quality control check or inspection request. Knocking out your own holes in the meter can, so you got to use the factory knockouts. But don't make your own holes in those meter cans. Metering department will reject that and it will not set the meter. Also, specifically in the meter cans, don't use plastic wall anchors. They're just not long lasting. They need to be something rigid, something like Tapcons or an appropriate fastener for whatever wall that you're working with. All right, next slide.
Hang on a minute. Hang on 1 second, Rory.
Yep.
Hey, listen, this is on that cut seal there. This is some advice for you people that's going to install solar. Before you get started, you see a cut seal on that utility meter, do not go ahead and install your solar installation. Get with the meter shop, those 2 numbers they had on there early slide, get with them and get that corrected. If you install that and got that cut seal, we're not going to know if you did it or not. So get that corrected before you do that. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rory. Next slide. Alrighty, so the installation. So here we have, you got your main panel and you've got your 2 meters. You've got your 2 inches around each meter, as we've discussed. So 6 feet to the top of that meter is going to be your upper limit, and no lower than 2.5 feet on the low side. Pay close attention to the service, like we've mentioned. The existing service will need to be brought up to code. If there's anything that's egregious or unsafe, pay close attention, particularly to the grounding electrode system. So if we're on site and you're doing a standard solar installation, but we find that that old panel is not grounded properly and not bonded properly, we will make you bring that up to code in order to be safe. So pay close attention to that, because that might be something that you need to address with sales and the homeowner at the beginning of the project. Because at the end of the project, nobody likes to hear it. Also, on the right there, that little diagram, pay close attention to where the billing meter is before you start the project. If it's under a large porch or an overhang that's beyond 6 feet, it could be possible that there was some unpermitted work that was done on site, in which case that will prevent customer from getting their solar meter. You need to make sure that the billing meter itself, the existing one, is out from under any large overhangs or porches if it's an overhead service. And that's in order to prevent any damage to overhead lines. So like I said, it's possible that that service, even though you don't have anything, you weren't responsible for its placement, the homeowner between the time of the meter setting and solar inspection may have done something that was unpermitted. So you've got to pay close attention that those meters are in the right spot according to our design criteria. You'll see the gas meter there. Regulator on that gas meter is where you need to keep everything out of a 3-foot radius from that gas regulator. That's all electrical components. Conduit, obviously EMT, you can have it run by gas meters, but anything that has a disconnecting means on it that could potentially create sparks is what we will be looking for in that 3-foot radius there. You need to have 6.5 feet of overhead clearance at a service panel. So you need to have safe working room around all of your equipment. All right, next slide. Okay, so the neutral needs to be broken in both the meter can and the AC PV disconnect. You can see here in the meter can, you got an isolated neutral bar, and you got a Polaris block in the disconnect. And the reason for that is utility may need to access that neutral for testing in the future. So please break the neutral in one of those two manners right there, so that, like I said, AE can have access to that neutral in those enclosures if necessary. All righty. So grandfathering systems, and what can you grandfather? What needs to be updated? Picture on the right here. So cloth insulated service entrance cables, they must be replaced on all services if installing solar. So there is no scenario in which we can allow that ragtop, as the old guys have called it. That needs to be updated. If you see that on a service, just include that in the cost of the project, because you will need to redo that service. You'll need to pull a separate permit, and you'll need to get that upgraded before you can tie in the solar. If you see something crazy like on the left here, get in touch with us, and we'll work together, find a solution for you to tie in solar and bring this up to code as safely and quickly as possible.
Hey, can I add more things, Stuart?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for returning that slide. One thing I ain't mentioned in here, if you got a residential federal panel, and you old timers out there know what I'm talking about, that's going to have to be replaced. Just a note, if it's a federal panel out there on a residential house, that panel needs to be replaced if you're going to add solar to that. And again, if you're old timer like me, you know what I'm talking about, because those breakers been known not to trip. That's the reason. Okay, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Rory. So energy storage systems, AC coupled energy storage systems. Those are the only ones that we allowed in our territory. So the batteries and any customer loads must not be installed on the solar side of the PV meter. So any situation which would send current back through the solar meter is not allowed. So all you want on the solar side of the solar meter is the solar production equipment itself. So all kilowatt hours produced by the array, they got to be metered first. If you're going solar array, inverter, aggregate panel, something like that, disconnect, then meter, then interconnection. You can see in the diagram right there, basically what I just spelled out for you. You've got everything's metered. So any load, any battery needs to be on the line side of our solar meter. And that's simply because the solar meter is meant to spin one way, or it takes a read in one direction, not both. All right, next slide.
Stuart,
Yes.
I just wanted to do a quick time check. We have about 7 minutes left.
Okay.
So
I'll go
just
quick.
is that
I'll be fast. Thank you, Mary. Okay, so what's when do you need a placard at the service equipment showing the location of batteries? If batteries, energy storage, or solar disconnects are within 50 feet and you can stand in one spot on site and see all of the equipment, we'll consider that within site. So if you go further than that, or if your batteries are on the other side of the house or something like that, you will need a hard, permanent, mechanically attached placard at the service showing the location of those batteries and those disconnects. Please refer again to 705. 705 is a gold mine for good information as far as placards go and interconnection status. All right, next. Permitting. So ESS must be submitted with the DGPA that accurately documents the size of the system. So please pay close attention to that. Make sure that you know how many batteries you're installing and that the DGPA includes that information. Batteries, UL 9540 listed. That shouldn't be too difficult, but just confirm that. Make sure you've picked out the proper battery. There's no DC coupled interconnections on our grid for reasons that we discussed earlier. Batteries may not be installed anywhere in a dwelling unit. So they can be in a garage, they can be on the side of the house, but they can't be within a bedroom, closet, anything like that. Those are your two options, basically. Exterior or garages. See, in ESS projects submitted after July 26th of last year will require an electrical engineer to stamp those plans. So you won't be stopped in the process earlier than at the final inspection. So make sure that you've got that stamp because at the final inspection, we will be requesting it. All right, next. Are there any questions?
Stuart, there was one question in the chat that maybe you can answer, and I don't know if you did already, but Joel is asking, does AE approve breaker interconnections without a main breaker and with the 6-handle rule, or do all generation interconnections require a main breaker?
Yes, you got to have a main breaker. No, Austin Energy doesn't approve an interconnection without a main breaker. And the 6-handle rule has kind of morphed a little bit in the 2020 code cycle. So you can still have 6 disconnects, but they need to be in each of their own separate enclosures. So the 6-handle rule within one panel is no longer adequate. The line side tap or backfeed breaker got to have a main on the
Thanks, Stuart.
into the meter.
and Derek is asking, he said the disconnect in the last slide was not feasible. Is that still a requirement?
Say again or go back to the last slide.
Sorry, the disconnect in the last slide was not feasible. Is that still a requirement?
You need a fuse disconnect if you're doing a line side tap. Is that what he's talking about? You don't need a fuse disconnect if you're doing a backfeed breaker. You got to land your solar output in some sort of overcurrent protection, which breaker suffices. Did I answer that properly? All right, I think we're good. Is this This might be David.
Yeah, I'll take back over here. I know we've only got 3 minutes left in the meeting, so I'm going to try to breeze us through this section. But if any of you need to jump off right at 10:30, before you go, please enter your name and the name of your company as well in the chat. So that way we can record attendance that way, especially for those of you who are new contractors trying to get into our program. It's particularly important that you put your name in the chat so that we can make sure that you get the right credit for it. Anyway, I'll breeze through inspections here. So we have an inspection request form on the Austin Energy website for all solar inspections and all inspections that our group handles. So you'll find it at that link there. There are a bunch of required fields that you'll need to fill in. You can also use the file upload field at the bottom of the form to attach any sort of documents, for instance, the plans, the permit, any photos of the array, or any photos of equipment that you want to submit to us. Once you submit this form, it will populate our Smartsheet queue on our Smartsheet platform, and we will receive that data. We will schedule your inspection at the appropriate time and send you all notifications through the Smartsheet platform as well. And remember, if your inspection is with the city electrical inspectors and not with us, then please make sure to request that inspection through the Austin Building Connect portal instead. So for instance, if you need an inspection after a shutdown, or if you need any other sort of electrical inspection from the city, please use the AB&C portal. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so there are a few types of pre-installation inspections. So normal inspections are the final inspections where we approve your installation for interconnection to the grid and then install the solar meters. But there's several types of inspections you can use that request form for before you complete the installation. So for instance, there are rough inspections that are required if conduit will be hidden before the final inspection occurs. So for instance, if you're going to bury conduit in a trench or hide it in a wall, please make sure you call for a rough inspection through that request form so that our inspectors can come out and look at that conduit before it's hidden. The pre-construction meeting, as I mentioned earlier, this is a pre-construction, pre-installation design consultation with our inspectors. If you've got any questions about system requirements, if there are any odd site characteristics at the particular location where you're installing. Anytime you have a bunch of questions and need our inspectors to get like an on-site look at what you're going to be doing. It's highly recommended for new contractors, especially, to call for these meetings. These are not required for projects, though. All right, next slide, please. Pre-wire for solar. This is another type of pre-installation inspection. So unlike the other types of inspections, with pre-wire, you're just putting in solar-ready conduit for a future solar installation. So this is when there's no current solar installation happening right now. So for instance, mostly this is new construction. So a lot of these new construction homes, they want them to be solar ready. So if you are the contractor putting in that conduit, which is usually going to be empty conduit, please call for a pre-wire inspection with us so that we can check that conduit and make sure it's all good to go before it gets covered up and before that new construction project gets full approval from the city. So this slide just shows which inspection request type you'll select on the inspection request form. We'll make sure to keep a record on our end of which pre-wire inspections have passed so that we have reference to that later if the customer comes back and installs solar for real. And also, we do have a more standardized permitting process for pre-wire that is coming soon, so please stay tuned for that. I know right now the permitting department does not issue permits for pre-wire installations that are happening outside of city limits, but we are planning on that to change soon. All right, next slide, please. All right, just a quick overview of the types of notifications you can expect to receive about your inspections during the request and scheduling process. So when you submit your inspection request, you'll receive a notification from Smartsheet. You will also receive notifications when we schedule your inspection, if we postpone it or reschedule it, and also we'll send you an email with the inspection results after the inspection is completed. If the inspection fails, that email will also include a list of the deficiencies that the inspector identified. And once the PV solar meter is installed, we will also send you another notification after that. We work closely with our metering department to make sure we get those updates in a fairly timely manner, although those meter installation notifications don't usually align with the exact day that the meter is installed. There's usually a bit of a lag time there. The sender will usually be Austin Energy Solar Inspections via Smartsheet on these emails, or it will be our inspector's name via Smartsheet if it's an inspection results email that comes from them. But it will always come from this email address of automation@app.smartsheet.com. So to avoid these emails going to spam, please make sure that this email address is listed as a safe sender in that category in your email. And then if you have any inspection related questions, solarinspections@austinenergy.com is your best friend. And just a note on these notifications here at the bottom, if we schedule, for instance, multiple inspections of yours at the same time for the same contractor, these will all get lumped into a single email for the sake of efficiency. So please look for any breaks in your email that you get from Smartsheet, because that might mean there's information about a different inspection farther below in that email itself. All right, next slide. These are just a couple examples of what the notifications may look like. For instance, when it's requested, when it's scheduled. So you can take a look at that later when we send you this presentation. Next slide, please. All right, so basic requirements for attendance at inspections. We went over some of this earlier, but make sure you send a qualified electrician as your person in attendance. So either a master, residential journeyman, or residential wireman. And make sure you bring these items with you to the inspection as well. So we'd like to see the layout in the one line, your TDLR documentation. This includes, ideally, you should be driving a vehicle that's got the TDCL number on it. That's per TDLR requirements. Also, make sure that you have tools to make corrections. Our inspectors, at their discretion, if they've got the time, they may allow you to correct deficiencies on site. That could be the difference between a pass and a fail at the inspection that day. Also, make sure to bring a hard copy of your permit. Our inspectors like to see the hard copies of the auxiliary power permit as well. We remind you of this every time we send out those scheduling notifications. Next slide, please. All right, preparation for an inspection. We've covered quite a bit of this already. Some of these common errors in the box over on the right-hand side are key things to look for as you do quality control checks of your systems before you request inspection. Always refer to the distribution interconnection guide in addition to the relevant parts of the design criteria, particularly regarding metering. Before the final inspection, test it, full quality check, make sure it's performing properly, make sure all the wiring and equipment installation is done in accordance with our interconnection guide and design criteria documents. For rebated projects, this is also important. If you're doing a rebated project, please make sure you have received the letter of intent from us and that you have closed the installation step of the enrollment workflow prior to requesting inspection. For those of you who aren't familiar with what the LOI is, the letter of intent is essentially the rebate approval letter from our program team that says we have designated the rebate funding for the project and saying that we will pay out the rebate. So until we issue that document, your project is not approved for the rebate. So if you request and receive an inspection, a final inspection before you have that letter of intent document, your customer will no longer be eligible for the rebate at that point. So please make sure if you do not have that LOI and you're trying to get a rebate for your customer, make sure you have that before you request inspection. Otherwise, that could be a problem. All right, next slide, please. And this is a snapshot of the checklist. This is the checklist that our inspectors use when they go to final inspections, as well as other types of inspections as well. You can find this on page 63 of the Distribution Interconnection Guide. It's just a handy, very quick reference tool to see how we go through our inspections, generally speaking. Each of those rows of the checklist refer back to sections, subsections of section C of our interconnection guide. So use section C of the interconnection guide as your best friend for installing as you go along. And make sure your team goes through this checklist as you QC the system. All right, next slide, please. And I'll just wait till the end here to take full questions. So I'm just going to run through these contacts real quick. Here are some helpful links, some helpful Go links to our website, to different solar and renewable program related stuff. So yep, just use these handily. Next slide, please. And then, yeah, this slide and the next just go through basic, the contacts you will need if certain issues arise in the course of your work. So use these two slides first if you ever have any questions about who to contact for different issues that may arise in your projects, like if you need to cut a meter seal, or if you need a meter variance, or various other things that may arise. And I think that concludes this presentation. So we've got an appendix here. We won't go over that in this meeting, but when we send out the presentation, be sure to look through the appendix. It tracks more closely with things that are in the design criteria and interconnection guide. So we've tried to put together just a quicker reference document for you here. All right. If you have not logged out already, then if you still have any questions, please put them in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself, and we will answer anything you've got left for us. But that's the end of this meeting.